The next piece that we're going to be sharing is from David Karchere, and he is the spiritual director of Sunrise Ranch and Emissaries of Divine Light International. He's a spectacular human being, and we're going to be actually hearing a little bit first from little clips of people from Sunrise Ranch. And we are going to hear what it is that like we see as the vision of a thriving future, and what are we practically doing to get us there. And then Kiahi Eva is our operations director, among many other hats that she wears. She's also oh gosh, what could I say? Like a modern day spiritual kahuna, hula kahuna. And she's going to be sharing an exquisite chant that kind of shows some of our valley. And then David's going to lead into a brief conversation on how we are bridging worlds to our collective thriving future together. And so with that, I am going to start sharing my screen with everybody so that we can have this experience together and see what wants to emerge.
I imagine a collective future where all of humanity is awakened to the reality of oneness, and that we work together to heal ourselves and heal humanity.
Everyone and everything is cared for as sacred.
Everybody lives in abundance and in sacred space.
I see us becoming the divine beings we were always meant to be, and living into that.
My vision of our collective future is full of compassion,
quality, and co-creation.
Absolute harmony and peace. I want to live in a world where we don't harm any living things, which like includes the earth.
All people see each other as brothers and sisters, and the earth as our mother.
Finally realizing that we have the capabilities to manifest this heaven right here on earth.
Living more in our truth and through love, harmonious.
Developing a greater sense of friendship and seeing what you can trust as true in each person.
I see humanity coming together with the indigenous peoples of the world in a higher frequency and bringing peace on earth and heaven on earth.
I see us coming together as a new humanity, coming together in new ways to create.
We're going to upgrade our collective operating system to Humanity 2.0.
Every single human being gets to create what they want in this world with no barriers. We're all equal, we all support each other.
There's something magical that happens. There's a connection that deepens.
When our work is a celebration and is oriented towards sustenance of the earth, sustenance of each other, sustenance of ourselves.
Maybe in the future we all live in communities on a global scale, maybe like smaller communities that are all connected, but where we all work together and we all share things and we all appreciate each other and support and love and respect each other.
Community life for me is the beginning seeds of that happening in our whole society.
Growing food, honoring the earth, and spreading that message of love to the larger world.
Working in our garden, working with our animals, and working on my spiritual self every day. Coming through love.
I've dedicated myself to teaching about permaculture. I'm a permaculturist and a permaculture designer. I think that designing our habitat is what's going to feed us in our bellies and in our hearts.
Loving others, speaking truth, and giving my gifts in spaces that it's welcome.
Remembering and awakening to the truth of who I am, sharing that with others, and supporting them to remember and know who they are.
Trying to increase my capacity for compassion and understanding in other people so that I can meet them with more peace.
Just showing up in my community as my best self, being a helping hand and just being support.
Blessing my circumstance in every moment.
As I touch anything in my work, I am there to bless it and to lift it up to a higher level.
I'm dedicated to my own awakening and to assisting others in theirs and living a fully spiritual life here in an intentional community in Loveland, Colorado.
mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e au na mele e o mai e o mai e o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e au na mele e o mai e o mai e o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e au na mele e o mai e o mai e o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e au na mele e o mai e o mai e o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e o na mele e o mai e o mai e o mai
Thank you, Keahi. What a beautiful invocation of the source of all things and the source within all people. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody here to Sunrise Ranch in Eden Valley in Loveland, Colorado. Welcome to this beautiful setting where a community of people live and bring a new code and a new culture to the world. I'm David Karchere. And I'd like to speak to you today about building a bridge to our collective future. Building a bridge to our collective future. I believe that's what's happening during World Unity Week. We are building that bridge together. And we're doing it very consciously. Now, there are people all over the world. They're in the middle of this global pandemic, in the middle of all the chaos of what's happening and all the static that our culture is putting out. But I believe that there are awake people here who are taking part in this World Unity Week, who are consciously building that bridge to our collective future. In his most iconic song, Paul Simon wrote about this. He wrote about a bridge over troubled waters. And that's what we need today. We've got plenty of the troubled waters with all that's happening in our world, all that apparently is going so wrong in our culture. And yet in the middle of that, we're building a bridge here together. It's a bridge to one another. We're gathering together here in this virtual space with people around the world. We're extending ourselves out. We are connecting in a way that we haven't before. We're finding our common purpose, our common reality, our common lineage, and maybe most importantly, we're finding that we have a common destiny. And isn't that really what our culture is waking up to around the world? Around the world. And there is this tremendous marathon effect. And how does a marathon work? Well, not everybody starts at the starting line together. There's just not enough room at the starting line. Some people are well down the road before others get up to the starting line. And of course, not everybody runs the race at the same speed or finishes together. So what I'm talking about today is something that's being initiated by people who are awakening to our common destiny. But really, the facts of the world today, what's happening in our world today, are making that so obvious that we as humankind are sharing a common destiny, for better or for worse, and that there's so much of what happens to us that is going to happen to all of us. There's no such thing as global warming just for some of us. We're all in that boat together. And so it is with so much of what's happening in the world today. So that is what we're awakening to, our commonality, our common destiny, and then even our common origin. So there's so much that is happening in the world today. People protesting around the world, people who are just fed up, who've had enough of the way the world is going. I don't know if you caught the mayor of Atlanta, Mayor Keisha Bottoms, speaking about the recent murder there of a young black man by an Atlanta police officer. She was decrying it in the most passionate way. She was talking about how sad she was, and then saying she was just as angry as she was sad. And she was speaking not only for the people of Atlanta, but for people around the world. We've just had enough of the divisiveness. We've just had enough of the false narrative around ourselves as human beings, that we are separate, that we are at odds with one another. And yet, no matter what we do, it seems like that false narrative just keeps coming back and repeating itself and repeating itself. And even with the best intentions, it seems like we change some of the outer edges of culture, but there's some kind of cultural code that we're living out of that hasn't yet really flipped over, hasn't really yet reached the tipping point. Yet some of us are reaching a tipping point. We're reaching a point where we're past that divisive experience in ourselves. We're way past it. We're going into a unity experience in ourselves with each other. And we're coming together past that tipping point, and we're inviting the world to come on along. So I do believe that's what this week is about. Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta was speaking about how many good things they'd been doing in Atlanta over the years since Dr. King was there. And they've had black mayors in the city for many years now. And in her mind, they were doing all the right things to bring Atlanta along. And yet, this happens. There's a murder of a young black man. And it is telling us, I believe, something about our culture, that there's an underlying code that our culture is living out of. And we can change the faces of who's leading, and maybe even the races of who is leading. We can change some of the things about our culture. But until we have a change of the underlying code, the underlying beliefs, the underlying experience that is the rock bottom basis for our culture, until that changes, it all tends to revert back to this divisiveness. I find that working with people, even well-intentioned people, even visionary people, when the pressure comes on, when the thing really goes down, where something important is happening, so often there's a reversion back to the old code, the old divisive code that's been informed in human culture around the world. So what is that underlying code? What are those deep down beliefs that people have? Those beliefs are really important to take a look at and transform. It's so important to change out the code. That code says that we're all from different places, different ethnicities. different beliefs, different paths. And that our future depends on how hard we fight for our betterment to the detriment of somebody else or some other group. Who's ahead? Who's behind? And it's just not working. It doesn't work in human culture. And we see that same scenario played out from the micro to the macro, from nations to cities, communities, families. It's the same code at every level, and it keeps replicating itself. So how does all that change? I'd like to take a look at that with you, because changing the code is how we build a bridge to our collective future. The bridge is the new code that we're sharing together. It's a code of unity. It's a code of universal love. It's a code that acknowledges our common heritage. Yes, many strands, but one cord. We have a common lineage as humanity. Yes, from many places on the earth, each with their own unique, distinct identity, but all part of one reality, one body of humankind. So we have a common past, even though it's unique to each group of us. We all have a unique lineage, but we have a common lineage. And then we have a unique destiny, each one of us, but we have a common destiny. And my destiny depends on your destiny. It's a nice thing to say, but it's true. It's true. And in knowing the new code, the truth of that gets way down deep into our bones, into our soul, so that we know it. Something changes in us. Our motivations change. At a gut level, we change how we are with each other. And we deal with that wounded part of ourselves that is battling to get ahead, to defend ourselves, and to put somebody else down. I want to speak of something else that is a sensitive topic. And because it's so sensitive, we tend to avoid it. And yet, this sensitive topic is right at the core of the code that I'm talking about. And this topic has to do how we as human beings relate to things that we can't see. How we relate to things that we can't see. You can't see the code. You can't see the current code that's behind the culture of divisiveness that we're living in. Where would you go look it up? What library? Where on the internet would you find it? Yes, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories and all the rest, but that's not actually the code. The code is invisible. It's written in the hearts and minds of human beings. All of us. We have that code stamped in onto us. It's invisible. And yet it's influencing how we think and how we feel, how we act. And no matter how much we try to change our culture, we keep going back to that code that we cannot see. And because we can't see it, we won't see it. We can't do anything about it. So some of the most important things in our human experience we can't see. And we have the benefit of science these days. Science is all about what you can see. What you can see, you can observe it, you can measure it, you can test it. And that's great. We need science. We need to be able to test what's happening in the world today, both the physical world and also the social world. That's all important. But science sometimes keeps us from seeing what we have to see with our own eyes. Not just what science tells us on the basis of third-person observation, but what we observe firsthand as a human being. And so often our schools tell us, oh, that's not important. What you see is not important. Your eyes don't matter. Don't believe your lying eyes. But I say they're things you can only know firsthand. Those are the things that are deep in the human soul. You can only see the code with your own eyes. You can only see things that you can't see physically with your own eyes. The things that are inherent in your own human experience. So how do we get eyes on all that? How do we see it for what it is? Of course, the religions around the world have stories about what you can't see. And each teaches it in their own way. And behind those stories, there is something beautiful, something true, that all the stories point to, and all the names for what's unseen all point to. And it's all beautiful, what's behind those stories and behind all those names. And yet we know that so often the people of those faiths aren't really living out the truth that's behind the faith. And so in our contemporary scientific world, people are ready to toss out the unseen. They've been lied about it so often by people who say one thing and do something else, or people who have a certain way of couching what's in the unseen and then make everybody else who tells the story differently wrong. And so we end up fighting about the way you see things and talk about things that you can't see, and the way I talk about things that I can't see. And that works great, doesn't it? Brings us right back to this divisiveness. And yet, anyone with a little bit of logic and honesty would probably say that the world in which we live comes from one place. There is one sun up in the sky, and there's one earth we're living on here. And between you and me and all human beings on the face of this planet, whatever you want to call it, there's one source, one origin of the life that's in you and the life that's in me. It's the same. And we're different in many ways. We're also individual, so unique. And yet, that life that's within us, it's the same life. And it's the same love. The way you love your family, your children, if you have children, is the same way I love my family and my children, the children who are in my world. The origin, you see, is the same. It's only the names that are different. And the way we practice what we do to stay in touch with what we can't see. It's so often that the way we practice and the way we name what we believe in but can't see actually obscures the reality and doesn't connect us to it. It's so easy to begin to worship the ideas about what the names are and not the thing itself, the unseen reality. And so we disconnect from the new code, the code that gives us life. Isn't that what has happened to our culture? It's become a culture of divisiveness because we've lost track of the reality that we hold in common. Our common past, our common destiny, and the common source that we all have. And yet, when we open to that common source, we're humble enough to realize that my scientific beliefs don't necessarily tell the whole truth about who I am and who you are. And my religious practice or my spiritual practice doesn't necessarily tell me the whole truth about you and about me. Maybe it's when we're humble enough to see those things that we crack open to the new code. We awaken to something that transcends our individual way of living and believing and acting, our separateness, our I'm better than you, or I know better than you, or you're different from me. Yeah, so I'm talking about deep heart soul matters. I think that we're looking in the world today, at the world today, that is trying to find every other answer to figure out where we're moving into the future. We're trying to build a scientific bridge, perhaps, a social bridge, a political bridge, a religious bridge. I don't think it's going to work. Not until we get in touch with the one thing that we hold in common. And then we share that one thing. So not just as an idea, not just as a belief, but as a living reality. My question for myself is, for me, for the people close to me, in the organizations I'm a part of, in the communities that I'm a part of, with my friends, how do I make this real? How do I build a bridge to you and all the people in my life? How do we build a bridge together? How do we stop the nonsense of divisiveness and build a culture that's born out of the new code? That new code has got to be a living thing, not just some kind of digital code someplace, not just something in a library book. It's got to be a living code, something that's alive in our own experience and then alive in what we're sharing. It has to be filled with the energy that infuses the new culture, that animates the new culture. We can't just change culture arbitrarily. Oh, we like this form, this music, this video, or whatever it is, because it all just reverts back to the separatism. We have to change the code and then live the code and embody a new culture out of the new code. I don't know any other way to bring real unity. And as far as I can tell, we're coming down to it here together as human beings and as humankind. We can't fluff about a lot more with trying to shift the outer part of things, trying to beat around the bush and not get down to this core issue. I think at some level we all know that there is this core issue that is keeping us separate. And that one day, as a human being and as a human race, we just have to get down to it. And I think in some part of us, we know that when we do that, everything changes. And we're living our new life. We're past the tipping point personally. And then you and me together, we're past the tipping point. And we're bringing what's past the tipping point to the whole world. We're inviting the world. Come on. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's be this. So, do you have anything better to do in your life than this? I don't. I really don't. And I'm into all kinds of wonderful, creative things. But behind it all is the new code. And then expressing the new code into everything I write, everything I say, everything I create with my community and with people around the world, everything I profess, the music that I make, it's all to spread the new code, to build that bridge between us all. And then that bridge that we build between us becomes the bridge into the future. Do you think we're all going to walk separately into our own divisive futures and have a wonderful future on planet Earth? I don't think so. The bridge is one bridge for us all. one bridge for us all, and we build it together as humankind. A bridge across the troubled waters of the world in which we live. Yes, there are troubled waters. You'd have to be a fool not to see them. But we're building a bridge across the troubled waters. So let's do this thing. Let's build a new culture from the new code, and let's do it together. Let's build a bridge to one another, knowing that that bridge that we're building between us becomes our collective bridge into our collective future. Let's do this thing. Let's do it now.
How great was that? Wow, my goodness. Thank you so much, David Karchere, for sharing what's necessary to complete the cycle of integration and bring all of the islands of coherence in the sea of seemingly chaos back into a place and into an invitation of wholeness, of togetherness, of something that's really important to me, and I think a lot of people out there, which is bringing it back home, bringing it back to kindness, bringing it back to the source of who we all actually are, where we all come from, and what is ours to do together. I want to take a moment and see who's in the room. Tom Cooper, if you would share a few moments of reflection for us, I'd really appreciate it. That would help me do some things on my side.
I was just in the chat room absolutely agreeing with Jeannie, who's absolutely in favor of all that David said. And Rachel, it's great to have a sense of your bookending his presentation in such a radiant and uplifting way. David's spirit is so contagious, so infectious, and what we're hearing is so positive in a world where if you turn on the media, for the most part, it's going to be focused on something distracting, and it's going to be focused on pain, tragedy, and violence, and those things are certainly there, and David acknowledged the troubled waters, but the bridge is so potent and powerful. I put one behind me today. If you look at the image where I'm speaking from, there are a lot of bridges in the world. One of them in Miami is falling apart, and they're wondering whether they should let people drive over it anymore. And the reason is because of the design. So David's calling for a higher design. He's calling for a code that has within it the design of life itself. And I find when I'm aligned with that, and when I am really following what David's talking about, he's called it a holistic code. There is something bright, and there is the bridge, and there is an opportunity to really breathe deeply with joy and appreciation and spirit. So thanks for spontaneously calling on me, and spontaneously I'm filled with joy. Rachel, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And let's see here. I am just going to lead us into our next segment. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining on this one.